Dr. Haley Gemara will start from the second line at the top of Daf Ches Amud Beis. Amar Abledi Mishum Meir. Shtei Sukkos Shel Yotzim Zu Lefnimizu. The people who would make pottery used to have these temporary type of huts, and they would actually move them from place to place as they were targeting sales in a specific neighborhood. It's not much different than duct cleaners nowadays. They always call you and they say, we happen to be in your neighborhood, so we can offer you a special price. So by the potters, it was actually true. They would park in your neighborhood and they would do their thing. And the way they had it was Zulif Nimizu. They had their temporary sukkah, so to speak, was built in such a way where there's the inner chamber, which is where they lived. That was their family place where they lived. And it was also where they stored their inventory. And then there was the outer room, which acted as a gateway or as a vestibule to enter into their home. But in that area, they had their production area. That's where they made their pots. And that's where they serviced the customers as well. So the halacha is, if it's the inner one is not a sukkah. Even though it's built exactly like a sukkah, it has four walls and it has chach, you're not allowed to sit there as a sukkah. And Rashi tells us, the reason why you can't, and I'm going to glide into Rashi, it's on the left, it's about a couple of inches down from where we're up to. It's in the middle of the big Rashi where it's just Pnimis Ein Sukkah, and there's a notation in the middle of Rashi which is Daf Amud Aleph. So Rashi says, Hacha Ein Sukkah. The reason why this Sukkah v'yotzim you can't use as a Sukkah is the Minkira Milsa the Lashem Sukkah Hu Darbai. So the Sukkah is perfect. The problem is, since it's its regular house and he's there all the time, just staying there without any change doesn't show that he's sitting in the Sukkah Lashem Sukkah. So this is a chiddush. We haven't learned this until now. That besides all the other things of sukkah that it has to be, it has to be noticeable that when you're sitting in the sukkah, you're sitting there l'shem sukkah. So, for instance, we normally don't sit in the hut in our backyard. If we're sitting in the hut in our backyard, it's clearly that we're doing it for sukkah. And even if you have a removable panel in your dining room right above your table, and that's your sukkah, we normally don't sit with our roof removed and schach on it. So our sitting in the sukkah is apparent that we're doing it for the mitzvah. But if you're going on with your regular activities and there's no difference between what you've done every other day and today, you're not Yosy sitting in the sukkah. The Kol Yemais Hashana Dayer Hasam. That's the place where this person lives all year long. He eats there, he does his things there, and he sleeps there. So the fact that he just stays there on sukkahs will not make him be Yosy the mitzvah. However, v'chayav is b'mezuzah. It is his home. He lives there, and that's why the inner chamber is chayav b'mezuzah. But the outer chamber, which is a place where he doesn't normally live, is a good sukkah, and that's because when you're there, you can tell. Rashi is the kivan the kula shata lav hachadayer. Since all year long he does not spend his days in the entrance to his sukkah, in that little area, the entrance area, and this week of sukkahs, he's there, Ika Hakera, we can tell that he's making a change to where he's living for the Yom Tov sukkah. But it's potter from a mezuzah. And Rashi says, why is it potter from a mezuzah? Laila, it never needs a mezuzah. The lav dirahi, it's not considered a dwelling. Its purpose is not to live there. Its purpose is just to act as an entryway, as a vestibule to his house. And sometimes he meets people there, but generally it's not a place of dir, and that's why it's potter from HaMezuzah. Why is it potter from HaMezuzah? Let the outer vestibule be like the entranceway of the inner one, which is chayiv HaMezuzah. And Rashi tells us that a Beishar is chayiv in a mezuzah midirabana. Midirabana is a chayiv to put a mezuzah on an entranceway to a home, a vestibule that enters a home. And for the Gemara, the reason why you don't is because even the home itself, mishum deloy kaviyah. Here, even this home is not a permanent dwelling; it's moved around. So therefore, the entranceway to this home does not require a mezuzah midirabana. However, the home itself, as the Bryce said a moment ago, does need a mezuzah. Zok the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, Ganvach. There are 4 sukkahs that I refer to with the word Ganvach. Of each letter of this word refers to a different type of sukkah. What's similar in all of these sukkahs that we're about to list is that although they're structurally good sukkahs, they're made by people who are not mechuyev in the mitzvah of sukkah. So they're surely not built with any type of lishma. Sukkahs goyim, a sukkah that was built by a goy. Sukkahs noshim, a sukkah that was built by a woman. Sukkahs behema, a sukkah that was built for a behema. Sukkahs kusim, a sukkah that was built by a kusi whose Gemara here considers a goy. And just in case I missed any other categories, sukkah mikol makom. Any type of sukkah, share it will be kosher. Because we know you don't have to build a sukkah lishma, according to Beis Hillel. We're about to learn a machlokes b'Shammai and Beis Hillel, but according to Beis Hillel, which is who we paskin like, you do not have to build a sukkah lishma. All you need is that the sukkah should be misucheches k'el chasa. As long as it has the proper schach on it, it's a kosher sukkah. What does it mean, proper schach? My k'el chasa. Amar Chisda, who should also sell sukkah. The only rule is that even if a guy built a sukkah, the question is why he put that schach on the roof. If he put it just because he wants privacy, then this is not a kosher sukkah. But if the reason why the guy or anybody put the schach on the roof was because he wanted shade and he was trying to shade this little hut that he built, then it's a kosher sukkah. All we care about is that the schach should have been placed on the sukkah for the purpose of creating shade. After the Tana listed off these 4 sukkahs built by people who are not mechuyev in the mitzvah of sukkah, he throws in an extra catch-all phrase, sukkah mikol makom. What does he mean to include that these additional sukkahs are also kosher? So Gemara lasuya sukkahs rakvash. He's trying to also include the sukkahs that are in the word of rakvash. The Tanu Rabbanan, sukkahs rakvash, which means, now what's unique about these sukkahs is they're all very temporary type of sukkahs. However, they're all made by Yidden, by people who are mechuyev in the mitzvah sukkah. So the weakness in the following 4 sukkahs are not by who made them, but rather the weakness is by the actual structure of the sukkah. It wasn't built for permanence. So sukkahs rakvash, sukkahs royim, the sukkah of a shepherd, with their little huts they had out in the fields. Sukkahs kaitzim, the sukkah for those people who would watch the figs that were drying, that to be watched and shouldn't be stolen. So once again, they built shelters for them. Sukkahs bergonim, the sukkah of people who are paid to watch the city. The city placed guard on its outskirts to watch the city. They had these little huts. And sukkahs shoymrei payers, and the sukkah of someone who's watching payers. So these are all sukkahs, except they're not permanent. And sukkah mikol makom. And this time also throws out the catch-all phrase to include other sukkahs that he didn't mention specifically that are also going to be kosher, and with the same condition as the earlier Tana, which we said in the name of Reb Chisda is my kil chasa, Amar Reb Chisda, which also latzel sukkah. Mikol makom nasuyamai. This second Tana, who listed specifically the sukkahs rakvash, what does he mean to include when he added sukkah mikol makom? So Gemara la sukkahs ganvach, to include the 4 sukkahs that the earlier Tana had mentioned explicitly. So we have 2 Tanoim, and they're both saying exactly the same halacha, and they're both referring to the 8 same sukkahs. The difference merely is between how they express them and with what urgency. The first Tana felt that the sukkahs ganvach is most mistaber to be kosher, and then he had to add on the sukkahs rakvash. Yet the second Tana felt it's much simpler to understand that the sukkahs rakvash are kosher, and he added on as an extra chiddush the sukkahs ganvach. Why the difference of opinion? Zaktimar quite simple. High Tana the ganvach, alimalach ganvach, the Tana who listed off ganvach first, felt that the sukkahs ganvach are more mistaber to say that they're kosher sukkahs, mishum de kavi, because they're built as a more of a permanent structure. Because Tana mikol makom l'suyi rakvash, and then he added on the extra 4 sukkahs of rakvash in his words of sukkah mikol makom the loikavi, because they're less mistaber to be kosher sukkahs. So therefore, he adds them on as the extra chiddush. That's his perspective. But the high Tana, the Rakvash, the Tana listed off the sukkahs of Rakvash specifically first, Alimale Rakvash. He feels that the sukkahs of Rakvash are more kosher to say that they're kosher than B'nei Chiyuvin in it, because they were all built by a Yisro who's B'chuyuv in the mitzvah of sukkah.
What you want to
put? And then you just added the extra 4 sukkahs, the La B'nei Chiyuvin in, because in his mind they're less mistaber to say that they're kosher because they're built by non-Mechuyavim, and he wanted to say that they're also kosher.
Yosy?
Yes.
Wouldn't you want to state the bigger chiddush clearly, and then the other one agav rucha?
I was thinking that, and it makes perfect sense. But I think the only way I could understand it is it's the order. It's loizu afsu. First of all, these 4 I'm more sure about that they're kosher, but those as well. Although I hear the svara of what you're saying is if something's a bigger chiddush, it's more mistaber that he should mention them by name,
right?
Which is what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying. But there's 2 ways to look at it, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, and even if you feel it should be prioritized that way, so you can say the same svara just flip them around.
Yeah.
So it works anyway. Okay, Zakta Helig Mishnah, Sukkah Yishana, an old sukkah. What is an old sukkah? What's just happened? Oh, I turned 2 left. Let me see. Sukkah Yeshana, an old sukkah. Rashi tells us what an old sukkah is. Kedim Afarish. Rashi tells us that the Mishnah is shortly going to tell us what a sukkah Yeshana is. Rashi gives us a sneak preview. She'asa kodim lachag shloshim yom. You built the sukkah more than 30 days before sukkahs. And v'lo pir shehi l'shem chag. And when you built the sukkah, you didn't say, I'm building this l'shem mitzvah sukkah. So Sukkah Yeshana, Beishamai Poislin, Ubeisil Mashir. Beishamai holds it's possible, Beisil holds it's a kosher sukkah. The Ezahi Sukkah Yeshana. What is the definition of a Sukkah Yeshana? Kol Sha'asa Koidim Lachag Shloshim Yom. If you built it before Yom Tov, more than 30 days before Yom Tov, that's called a Sukkah Yeshana. Let's see Rashi. Beishamai Poislin, the boy is Sukkah L'Shma. Beishamai holds that when you build a sukkah, you have to build it l'shem mitzvah sukkah. Vizu stam nasis. And this sukkah was built without any specific intention. What if it's within 30 days? Why is that not called a sukkah yeshana? If it's within 30 days, it is considered l'shma. Why? Since the month before any Yom Tov, we're already tumbling and huddling and dealing with the Yom Tov, and we're learning the halachas. Therefore, stam ha'oisa l'shem chag ha'oisa. If you build a sukkah within those 30 days, where Yom Tov is at the top of our minds, we consider that you built a sukkah l'shma. Avokodim shloishim. But if you built a sukkah more than 30 days before sukkahs, and stama, and you didn't specify that it's l'shem mitzvah sukkahs, then lav l'chag will say it wasn't built l'shma. They still hold it's kosher. Do I being sukkah l'shem chag? You don't need a sukkah l'shma at all, like we had on the Mabez before. These sukkahs don't have to be built l'shem the Yom Tov, as long as they're built with the intention of using the schach for shade. Zok the Gemara, Zok the Mishnah, Zok the Mishnah weiter, Avam also l'shem chag, but if you built the sukkah specifically intending that you're using it for sukkahs, then afilu mitchilas hashana ksher, then there's no time limit. As far in advance as you made it, it's good if you made it l'shem sukkah. The Silas ksher, I'm sorry, the second half of the Mishnah that talks about if you built it l'shem sukkah, it's going to be kosher no matter what. Rashi says l'beishama yitzvah. Now there are those who argue and say that it's not mistaber that the Mishnah would elaborate on finding a place where it's fine according to Beishamai, because we normally pass like Basil, and normally the Gemara won't elaborate on understanding Beishamai sheet. So Tosfos tells us something interesting. According to Basil, that a sukkah that's yeshana is not kosher. It's not perfect that you could just sit in it. All you got to do is bring in your challah and your wine, and you're ready to make kiddush and a leishev. It does require some type of tikkun. Tosfos brings it down from the Yerushalmi. Tosfos, the Yerushalmi says that even if it's a kosher sukkah according to Basil, you have to manipulate the schach a little bit. You got to do something. And therefore, Zok Tosfos, that at the end of the Mishnah, when the Mishnah says in Masal Hashem Chag, Afilu Mitchilas Hashana Ksheira, that's not only telling us a chiddush in Beishamai, but it's also telling us that according to Basil, you wouldn't have to manipulate the schach at all. Zok my time of the Beishama. Where did Beishama get this halacha from? That a sukkah has to be built l'shem mitzvah sukkah. Zok Omar Ko. The pasuk says, Chag hasukkos shivas yomim Lashem. So Rashi tells us, Chag hasukkos Lashem. Sukkah l'shem chag. Because sukkos Lashem. So Lashem means pasuk pshat to the Rebbeinu Shalom. But Lashem could also mean Lashem mitzvahs hamela. You have to build the sukkah with the kavana that you're doing it to be mekayim the mitzvah of sukkah. So therefore, sukkah asui Lashem chag ba'inon. You require a sukkah that's built for the mitzvah of sukkah. Well, Basil tells us that's not what you learn from that pasuk. You need that pasuk to teach us the chiddush that Reb Sheshes has taught us, which is Reb Sheshes Mishum Reb Akiva Minayin la'asei sukkah she'asur and kol shiva. How do you know that the wood of the sukkah is muksa all 7 days? Talmud loimer chag hasukkos shivas yomim Lashem. What do you see from there? The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseyo Aimer, the Chag of Chag HaSukkah Shivas Yom Lashem is referring to the carbon Chagiga. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseyo says, Keshem Shechal Shem Shemayim ala Chagiga, just like the Shem Shemayim is Chal on the Chagiga. And Rashi tells us, Shalom and Chagiga Shem Shemayim Chal aleim la'oisron. They become Osir Bano ad la'akar aktaris Emurin until the Emurin, until the carbon was processed. And then the bialim gets the meat. But up until that point, it's Osir Bano. The carbon is Osir Bano. Kach Chal Shem Shemayim ala Sukkah. So too the Sukkah is similar to the carbon, that during the Yom Tov of Sukkahs, it's Osir Bano. Shenemar Chag HaSukkos Shivas Yomim Lashem. Machag, just like the carbon Chagiga is Lashem, Av Sukkah Lashem. So Zok Basil, you cannot use the pasuk that Beishamai used to say that the sukkah has to be l'shma, because you need that pasuk to tell you that the sukkah is muksa all of sukkahs. Beishamai dami miboyle lahachi. Beishamai also agrees that the sukkah is muksa all of Yom Tov. He'll need a pasuk to teach us that. Well, how will he know that the sukkah has to be l'shma? We have another pasuk. It says Chag HaSukkos tasalach shivas yamim, and we learn from there that sukkah asui l'shem chag ba'ina. How do you see that from this pasuk? Chag HaSukkos tasalach shivas yamim. So Rashi says you have to do a little bit of surgery on the pasuk. It says Chag HaSukkos tasa, but we flip it around and we say sukkahs tasa l'chad. Make the sukkah l'shem l'chad. Sareisa mikveh v'darshei. That's a Rashi. So let's stop for a moment and talk about this Isser to have a no on the boards of the sukkah. We know the boards of the sukkah are muksa, you can't have enough of them until after Yom. But what about after Yom? Do the boards of the sukkah retain the kedusha after Yom? So there are those who hold, in fact, that they do retain some kedusha. And Tosfos says that the Atzei Sukkah are also midiraisa from the pasuk, but he also brings a Gemara that says that even after you take the sukkah apart, it's still going to be asur. So Tosfos says the deraisa is. So I'm going to go to the sort of the bottom of the Tosfos, about 1.5 inches down from the skinny lines. The had asur midiraisa, the isur deraisa that our Gemara is discussing is haina ba'oida kayemes, while the sukkah is still standing. Asur lital mimena eitim. You're not allowed to rate it for wood. Avol mishanafla, once the sukkah falls down, and this is even on sukkah, the bottle mitzvasa, where it's no longer functioning to do the mitzvah of sukkah, lo yasira el midirabanan is only an isser midirabanan. But after sukkah, it doesn't seem like there's an isser to have enough on the boards. However, they still have a certain level of kedusha and require a certain level of respect. As a matter of fact, there was a famous story with the Chassam Sofer. A boy came to get a faher to join his yeshiva right after Sukkot. And they had just taken apart the sukkah, and the boards were piled up. They hadn't yet carted them away. And the boy, as he was walking into the yeshiva, stepped on the boards of the sukkah. And the Chassam Sofer noticed that. And he said, a bacher who has such disregard for the kedusha, the mitzvah of sukkah, that'll just step on the boards, I don't want him in my yeshiva. So you see, there's a kedusha on the boards even when they're taken apart, even when they're in your storage area. You shouldn't stomp on them. Dr. Gemara Viter. Ube Silo, the Shammai now found another pasuk to tell him that there has to be lishma. What is Beisil going to do with that pasuk? Because he also doesn't need to be lishma. To teach you, you're allowed to build a sukkah on Chalamoid. What if you didn't have a chance to build your sukkah before Yom Tov? You're allowed to build a sukkah on Chalamoid. And Rabbi Eliezer, who says you cannot. So there's now two machlokes in between Beis Shammai and Beisil. Beis Shammai holds that that it's also to build a sukkah Chalamoid, but every sukkah you build has to be l'shma. Beisil holds the sukkah doesn't need to be l'shma, but it's mutter to build a sukkah on Chalamoid. You've just set up a halacha that Beisil holds the sukkah doesn't have to be built l'shma, which would sort of indicate he holds in general mitzvahs don't have to be made l'shma, which means Beisil is going to be arguing on the shita of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, who in fact said that mitzvahs do have to be made l'shma. So frag the Gemara, Beisil less lahu Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Does Beisil argue on Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, who says as a general rule mitzvahs, chefts of mitzvahs have to be made l'shma? The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, we're talking here about tzitzis. And when you weave a beged, you take it off the loom rough, there's a whole bunch of fringes sticking out of it. Loose threads, fringes. Well, what if you said, hey, why should I put tzitzis on this beged? There's already fringes on the beged. I'll just use those fringes as my tzitzis. So what did Rav say? Also in the kaitzin, from the fringes at the end of a woven beged, umina nimin, and nimin are extra, if you sewed up a seam or you sewed up a hem and there's extra thread hanging out of it, or graden, or also these are threads that are left over from the weaving process, sula, it's possible. So you see clearly that the tzitzis have to be put into the beged lishma. However, in a season, if you had a ball of thread that's not part of the beged, there you can cut strings off of that ball and use it as your tzitzis. Share it will be kosher. That's what Rabbi Yehuda learned when he was a Talmud of Rav. And after Rav was nifter, Rabbi Yehuda went to join Shmuel's yeshiva, and he shared with Shmuel some of the halachas that his last Rebbe taught him. So Kiamrisa Kamei de Shmuel, when Rabbi Yehuda relates this story that when I told the Torah that I learned from Rav, when I told it over to Shmuel, Amar Li, Shmuel responded to me, Af min asisa na mipsula. Even if you take thread from this ball of thread to use as your tzitzis, and you're putting them into your beged lishma, it's still possible. You know why? The ba'inin tefillah lishma. Not only does placing the tzitzis in the beged need to be done lishma, when they spin the threads, they even have to be spun lishma. So, frag the Gemara, being that you see that when you prepare a chefta shel mitzvah, it needs to be done lishma, so hachanami nebai sukkah asur lishma. So why don't you need a sukkah that's made lishma? Beisil holds you don't. Why not? Zok the Gemara, shiny hasam, by tzitzis, the reason why you need it lishma is because there's a special pasuk to tell us that it needs to be made lishma. The Amar Krog, Gedilim Tasa Lecha. Lecha tells you L'Shem Chayvach, L'Shem the mitzvah of tzitzis. In fact, the Gemara, by sukkah you have the same expression. Hachanami Gabechaga Sukkah is Tasa Lecha Lecha L'Shem Chayvach. So the Gemara, that pasuk cannot be used to tell you need it Lishma, because we needed to teach us a different halacha. That you're not allowed to have a sukkah gzula, which the Gemara will discuss later what that means. In fact, the Gemara, by tzitzis as well, you're not allowed to have stolen tzitzis. I need a pasuk to say that I can't use tzitzis that I've stolen. So the Gemara, by tzitzis, there's two extra psukim. One to tell you it can't be gzula, and the asulahem mishalahem to tell you that it also has to be made l'shem. So let's see what we have over here. We have the halacha that it has to be done l'shma. So we have a little bit of a problem because Tosfos asks a very, very good question. Tosfos says we have a pasuk that says that a sukkah gzula is possible because it says l'cha l'shem chayvach, which he doesn't have l'shem chayvach means l'cha v'lo gzula. The problem is, Tosfos says, why do I need a pasuk to tell me that a stolen sukkah, you're not yoyed to the mitzvah of sukkah, is it not a mitzvah of baba avera? And we know if you do a mitzvah of baba avera, you're not yoyed to the mitzvah. That's Tosfos' kasha. It's a beautiful kasha. Tosfos answers in his first teretz that maybe mitzvah baba avera is only an issur derabanan. We're trying to show that for a sukkah gzula, it's also asur b'deraisa. Depends on Gishmak of Pshat, but there's other Rishonim who have a bigger twist, and they say, let's think of a case where there would not be the problem of mitzvah baba avera, yet there would still be a problem of sukkah gzula. And some of the Rishonim suggest the following case, where someone went and stole the sukkah from his father. So it's a sukkah gzula. But before he had a chance to use it, his father died, and now he inherited the sukkah, so it's his. So they want to learn that that's not a mitzvah baba avera because you're using your own sukkah. But since it's already labeled with the stamp of gezula, you won't be able to use it. There are those who don't understand that, because if I yashin, it's not gezula anymore, now it's mine. But that's one of the svaras that the Rishonim offer. And the third svar is brought down by the Minchas Chinuch. He says a beautiful word. He says in sukkah there's two dinim. There's the mitzvah chiyuvis. Every person is mechuyev to eat in the sukkah the first night. A, and B is then there's the mitzvah chiyuvis. The rest of the week you don't have to eat in the sukkah. If you don't sleep and you don't eat to be in the sukkah. If you want to eat a sudas kavua, then you have to eat it in the sukkah. So therefore, Zok the Minchas Chinuch beautifully. Mitzvah baba avera says that you're not going to be mekayim the mitzvah. So on the first day of Sukkot, if it's a mitzvah baba avera, you won't be out to the mitzvah. But a mitzvah baba avera doesn't mean that it's not a kosher sukkah. It means you can't be mekayim a mitzvah through an avera. So all week long, you'd be able to use that sukkah. But if you have a pasuk to tell you that a sukkah gzula is possible, now you can't even be yoy to the mitzvah in that sukkah at all. Therefore, you'd have to build a second sukkah. There are those who argue on the Minchas Chinuch. Rabbi Kiveger says these two things travel together. If it's a good sukkah to be able to use during the week for the mitzvah kiyumis, it's going to be a good sukkah for the first night as well. So this is the discussion around this shayla. Okay, let's see the Gemara Vayik. So we're now on Daf Tes Amud Beis at the top of the Amud, the Mishnah. If one makes a sukkah under a tree, it's as if he made it inside his house. So this is a very interesting expression. And another way to have said this same halacha was psula. The Mishnah normally doesn't engage in hyperbole. It's like you built it in the house. So we're going to need an explanation for that, which the Gemara is going to learn very important information from this comment. Shlomi Golder said over a couple of nights ago that he used to work when he was a young kid, like 12, 13 years old. He used to work for my father. My father, as a teenager, had a schach business. He would go down to the lakefront. Then there was shore area, swamp area, and they would chop down reeds, they'd bundle them up, throw it into the back of the pickup. He told me, your father picked me up and threw me onto the pile of reeds in the back of the pickup, and we drove around into the different shuls. They drove around different shuls to deliver schach to people. And what they would do is, as a service, they wouldn't just drop it by the front door. They would put the schach on the sukkah or by the sukkah. So they went to one shul and they went around the back. They couldn't find the sukkah. So they started banging on the door to find out where the sukkah is. So the shamus answered. Shamus was a firm yid, although the shul was a conservative shul. And he asked the shamus, where's the sukkah? He says, where's the sukkah? Come on in, I'll show it to you. It's in the social hall. So that was mamash sukkah b'soich habayis. So sukkah al gabe sukkah. What if you build one sukkah on top of another sukkah? The upper sukkah will be kosher, but the lower sukkah will be kosher. And this, so there's a lot of detail to this halacha that the Gemara is going to elaborate on. Rabbi Yehuda says, if the upper sukkah is not livable, it's as if it's not there. And therefore, the lower sukkah will be kosher. Amar Rava, this halacha, that oisha sukkah tachas ilan, it's a apostle of sukkah, that's only elabe ilan shetziltai meruba mechamas. That's only if the tree that's hovering over your sukkah has a thick canopy and it creates a lot of shade. That it in and of itself would be a kosher schach if it wasn't for the problem of the mechuber. But if the tree is sparsely leaved, and therefore the sun gets through it, Shera, it wouldn't cause a problem to the sukkah that you built below it.
What about the height of the tree?
If the height of it, we're talking about the height of the tree will be within 20, because if it's not within
Right.
20, then it couldn't be part of the schach anyway.
So that's fine.
But let's have a look. Now, Rava is making an assumption here. Rava is making an assumption that if it's a completely kosher sukkah and it has all of its own schach, then there might not be such a big problem. There wouldn't be a problem at all if the sukkah above didn't have much schach. But Rava wants to say that even if your sukkah, as it stands, doesn't have quite enough schach, and you need to add to it the pasal schach that's on the tree above, it would also be kosher. So Amar Rava if it's a tree that in and of itself wouldn't be good schach, it would be kosher, and we could even be mitzayir the schach from the tree to help our sukkah. Mimai, how do I see that? When the Tana said it's puzzle, he used a strong lashon. It's as if you made it in the house. Why didn't the Tana just stick to the halacha and say psula? It's teaching me a very important rule. The ilon domi debayis, making a sukkah under a tree will only be possible if, under the same conditions, it would have been built inside your home. Ma beisai, just like in your home, it's only going to passel the sukkah if it's tilta meruba mechamta. But if your roof is mostly missing, even the sukkah in the house would have been kosher. Af ilon, so too, if you built a sukkah under a tree, it's only a problem if the tree is tilta meruba mechamta. Correct the Gemara. So you're telling me that if you have a tree that doesn't have much leaves on it, you're allowed to use that and combine it with your schach? My have it. You're going to allow you to use that schach. You're mixing the pasal schach because it's still connected to the tree above, to the kosher schach that you have on your sukkah. So how could you say that's a kosher sukkah? Rav Papa says a massive chiddush. B'shechavtan. You mixed it together. Let's see Rashi. What does it mean b'shechavtan? Hishpil anafav l'mata. You pull the tree, the branches of the tree down to be on par with your schach. Mu'uravin im schach kosher. You mixed it together with the schach kosher. They near and ben. You can't really see it with a glance. U'schach kosher rabba olav. There's roiv kosher schach there, umevatla, and it will be mevatel the pasal schach. The midaraisa kol mili batal baruba. We know there's a concept that things are batal baroiv k'nitnan b'masnizin imoyeschichach meruba mengsher. But the Mishnah will say later on that if there's more kosher schach, it's kosher. So we're using the concept of bittul baroiv to be mevatel the pasal schach in the kosher schach. So the Achronim have a bombadik akashi here. I'm sorry?
Okay.
The Achronim have a bombadik akashi here. We know there's a concept of batal baroy, which means if you're cooking a pot with 5 pieces of kosher meat in it, and the piece of nevela falls into it, it's batal baroy. If the piece is batal baroy, you're allowed to eat all the pieces. So using that same concept, the Gemara wants to say a piece of treif chacha mixed in, batal baroy. The problem is, if a piece of treifa meat fell into your pot, and you had a way of identifying which piece is the treifa meat, would you be allowed to eat it? Of course not. You'd have to take it out. So oy bazoi, here you can find the schach that's puzzle. It's still connected to the tree. So now it's mixed in. You have to pull it up. That is the kasha that the Achronim struggle with. So Rabbi Razer said over from Rabbi Yossi Ber Soloveitchik a nice clear, and he asked, what happens when you can identify the isser, the one piece of meat that's not kosher, you can identify it in the mixture? Does that tell you that it's not a mixture at all? It's not a terubis? Or does that tell you, sure, it's a mixture, but it's still usher to eat that piece? What's the nafkamina? If you hold it's not a mixture at all, then we have a problem in our sukkah. Because if it's not a mixture, then the kosher, the pasal schach cannot be used. But if you hold it is a mixture, it's just that you have to take out isser because you're not allowed to eat something that you know is nevela, then here it's not a problem because there's no isser here. There's no isser in standing under a tree. So therefore, you say bittul, and you don't have to take anything out because there is no isser. So that's a shaila. If you hold that if you could tell which piece it is, that makes it that it's not called a tarubis, then you have a problem. But if it's called a tarubis, it just doesn't allow you to eat something you know is also here it wouldn't be a problem. But the Achronim do speak about this. If the case is where you mix the schach together and it's bottle baroy.
Just a question, Yossi. So you want to say that pasal schach is not an isser, but isn't it an isser to sit in a sukkah that has pasal schach?
If it's not bottle baroy.
But you can't be mevatel an isser lechatchila.
Oh, so now you're asking me another good question. Ein mevatel an isser lechatchila. Why isn't this a problem of mevatel isser lechatchila? Because we're soon going to discuss, the Gemara hasn't said it yet, but the Gemara is soon going to say that you're allowed to do lechatchila, you're allowed to build a sukkah this way. So the Achronim do ask that kasha. I forgot the teretz that was offered to it, but that is a prominent kasha that's asked in the sukkah. And the answer might be the same thing as what we're saying here, is that it's not isser, it's just pasal l'schach. And maybe there wouldn't be the problem. But
hang on a second. Basar v'cholav isn't usher either on each one on its own, but you can have basar and you can have cholav, but you can't have a taruvas of basar v'cholav. So you cannot be mavatal. In hilchos basar v'cholav, you cannot be mavatal cholav into basar lechatchila, even if it's going to be batal b'shishim. You can't be mavatal it lechatchila. And there you have.
I hear. It's a very interesting point. But we're still dealing with a different category. That's something that's usher to eat. It's something that's usher. There's nothing usher about pasal eschach.
But what you end up with is a pasal sukkah.
There's nothing usher about a pasal sukkah. You might not be able to.
You can't use it. You can't sit in it.
But that's if you're not allowed to make a terevis. But who says you're not allowed to mix something that's kosher with something that's pasal? The isser is to be mevatel something that's an isser. There is no isser here. It's just a question: is this pasal eschach?
No, right. So, but what I'm saying is by
pasal and usher are two different things.
What's that?
Pasal is not isser.
No, I understand. So that's what, but that's the distinction between basar v'cholav and all other taruvos.
No, because basar v'cholav also is isser.
No, but you're taking two things that are heter. You're taking two things that are heter. You're mixing them together.
I agree, but when they get mixed, they become usser. This never becomes usser. Pasal eschach never ever becomes usser.
Pasal eschach, but the sukkah becomes usser. You want to make a kosher sukkah.
Does it become usher? Isser means you're prohibited to eat something. There's never isser here. The question is if it's kosher sukkah or not. So all these rules are suspended when it comes to the question of kosher or pasal. The rules only apply when there's an isser involved. That's what they time. No, you bring up a good point, but that's what their point is. So, if you were mabatlet, why in the world do I need a mishnah to tell me the general rule that we all know is that you can mabatel meat in the right? The reason why the Mishnah wanted to specify it is because you might have a concern. If we allow you to take branches that are still connected to the tree and mix them in, well, we're afraid, what if you don't mix them in so well? Then the taka will be a pasal sukkah. So maybe we shouldn't let you use anything from a tree that's still connected. Our Mishnah is teaching you that we don't make such a gzeira, no problem, you're allowed to use shat schach. In fact, Gemara, I know that as well from another Mishnah. Hanami Tanina. This that you're allowed to use and mix the schach, we know it from a Mishnah. And we're going to learn later. Hidla aleh sagefen, v'sedalas, v'sakisa. If you had your sukkah before you put schach on it, you pulled a vine, you had vines that were growing nearby to your sukkah, and you stretch these vines across your sukkah, which basically is a layer of pasal eschach. The sikach al-gaban. And then you put your bamboo mat on top of it. Sula, this sukkah would be possible. The imsikuch harbe mehen, but if you have enough schach that silta maruba mechamta with the schach alone, you don't need the pasal schach there at all, then it will be kosher. That's exactly our case. I'm sorry, I didn't say, I misspoke. Not that you don't need the schach at all. If there's a lot more kosher schach than pasal schach, even if you still need the pasal schach to supplement the kosher eschach, but if there's more kosher eschach, it'll still be kosher. This seems to be the exact case that we just discussed. So from this case already, you know that you don't make a gzeira to disallow this because you might not mix it well. Because the Mishnah here says very explicitly that you're allowed to do it. So the Gemara's kasha is, why do we need our Mishnah to tell us the same halacha that we learn from this following Mishnah? Now the following Mishnah continues and says another way to make the whole thing, to make the whole problem go away, is if you just cut off all the vines from where they're growing from, it would solve all your problems because now you have kosher schach. So let's analyze this first case of this price. Hechadami, the brisa that says, or the Mishnah that says that if you put more schach, if there's more kosher schach, it's kosher. If it's b'shaloi chaftan, if the vine is disconnected from the sukkah, they're not mixed together, well, you wouldn't be able to say that that's a kosher sukkah because a kametztayr schach pasel and schach kosher. You're using schach pasel over here, which doesn't work. Elalav kishachaftan, you have to say it's when it's mixed together, and you're using the svara of bittul barai. Ushmamina the loy gezrina. So you see that there's no gzeira. You see it's allowed in this Mishnah here. Zok to Gemara, from that Mishnah you only see that if you did it already, you ask the Rav, I've done it already. Can I sit in the sukkah? He'll tell you yes. If you go ask the Rav, I don't want to put so much schach on my sukkah. I'll put most of the schach on the sukkah, and then I'll pull the branches down and mix it in. Am I allowed to do that? Kamashalon, that the Rav will tell you, yes, l'chatchila, you're allowed to go and do that. And that's what our mission is coming to tell us. Sukkah al-gabi sukkah. If you have a double-decker sukkah, what is the halacha with a double-decker sukkah? Zok to Gemara. Tanur Rabban, where do you know that a sukkah on top of a sukkah is going to cause a problem? The Torah says, it says Basukkah's Teshu, and really it's pronounced Basukkah's. The Yeshem Mikra is Basukkah's plural, but we know that the way the word is written in the Torah is without the vav. So Tsukkahs, which really would be read Tsukkas, which would be singular. So you should sit in one sukkah, in a single sukkah, v'loy b'sukkah shetachas sukkah, not in the bottom half of a double sukkah. So from the Yesh Aim L'Misayres, from the way it's written, we learn that you're not allowed to sit in a sukkah that's under another sukkah. Now we used that a couple of days ago. A machlokes, is it Yesh Aim or Mikra? Do you follow the way it's written, or is it Yesh Aim L'Misayres? Do you follow the way that it's written in the Torah? So Yesh Aim Mikra means you follow the way that it's read, pronounced, or do you follow the way that it's written? So the Torah to that, the Rishonim tell us, is very posh. Even if you hold Yesh Aim L'Mikra, you follow the you read it, that doesn't mean you totally ignore the way that it was written, and vice versa. If you hold Yesh Aim L'Misayres, it doesn't mean you totally ignore the way that it's pronounced. It means you give more weight to the Mikra, or more weight to the Misayres. But Avada, the Misayres and the Mikra are still very important. So therefore, even if you hold Yesh Aim Mikra and you read it as plural, but the fact is the word was written singular. And from there we learn, V'loy b'sukkah shetachas sukkah, v'loy b'sukkah shetachas ilan, v'loy b'sukkah shetachas bayis. It has to be a standalone sukkah. Correct Gemara, how do you see that from there? Adrabah, the sukkah is the way you pronounce it, as sukkah is in plural, tarti mashma. It's mashma that even a dual sukkah would be good. Amar Nachman bar Yitzchak, the sukkah ksev. We focus on, in this case, we focus on the Misayres. We focus on the way it was written. Zok to Gemara, Amar Birmiyah. Even though the Mishnah seems to make it simple, that a sukkah gabi sukkah, the lower one is puzzle, the upper one is kosher, there's a lot of variations to this halach. I'm going to give you an example of a case where both the top and bottom would be kosher. Sometimes they're both puzzle. And I'm sorry, period. So those are the four variations. It comes in all shapes and sizes. Now the Brisa goes through these cases one by one to clarify what the circumstances are. Sometimes both the upper and the lower sukkah will be kosher. And the reason is because it's really one sukkah. The example is going to be a case where it's really one sukkah. How is that? The lower sukkah didn't have kosher schach. So it's not even a sukkah. The upper sukkah had a kosher schach, and one more condition, the kaimel yoina b'soich esrim, and the upper sukkah is within 20 amas of the floor. So even if you're standing on the floor, the schach of the upper sukkah will still be kosher for you. So come to chois, whether you're standing on the upper level or on the lower level, you're really in one big sukkah. And if anything, it's like a sukkah with a mezzanine, because there is no second layer of schach. There's sometimes where both the upper and lower sukkah will be possible. What would be the example? Going to Tervayu, Tzilton, Meruba, Mechamta. They both have kosher schach. So the lower sukkah we know is going to be possible because there's a sukkah above it. The upper sukkah is possible because the kaime el yoina l'mayla me eshermam. The schach of the upper sukkah is more than 20 amas, or is 20 amas higher than the floor of the upper sukkah. So the people in the upper sukkah can't use that schach up there because it's possible schach. So now you have both sukkahs that are possible. Sometimes the lower one will be kosher and the upper one will be possible. What is that example? That's when the lower sukkah has proper schach, but the upper one is chamta meruba mitzilta. It doesn't have enough schach. The kaimu tarvayu b'soichesu, and both of these schachas are within 20 of the ground. So therefore, the lower sukkah is kosher because it has good schach. The upper sukkah doesn't have good schach, so it won't cause a problem for the lower sukkah. And sometimes the upper sukkah will be kosher and the lower sukkah will be possible. When is that? Going to Tarvayu, Tilton, Meruba, Mechamtam. They both have proper schach. The kaimel yoina b'say cheshim, and the upper sukkah is within 20. Let's just see what Rashi says. Rashi goes in detail through all the cases, but I just want to focus on the last shtickle. Tachtoinik shera vel yoina psula. When is the tachtoinik shera and el yoina psula? It's I want to go back one Rashi. Shteim psulais. When they're the same psulais, when the upper one is more than 20 amasai, and Rashi is very specific. Legaga shel tachtoina, the upper sukkah is possible only if its schach is 20 amas above the top of the lower sukkah, which is the floor of the upper sukkah. So in order for the top sukkah to be possible, because it's too tall, it has to be 20 amas from its floor, not from the ground. If the upper schach is chamsa meruba mitzilta, it's not schach, and therefore because of that, the lower sukkah will not be possible because of sukkah tachasukkah. The upper sukkah is possible. You should be chamta meruba mitzilta. Both these schachis layers are within 20 of the ground, so that the upper schach might impact the lower schach. If the upper schach was above 20 from the ground, then Zok Rashi, psula, even the lower sukkah would be possible, mishum the mitzvah schach possible by the kosher. So what Rashi is telling us, that we're talking about, even when we said that the lower schach is good, it's still to move mechamta, but the upper schach is not good, because it's chamta move mitzilta. The lower schach is only good if you combine it with the upper schach. So if you combine it with the upper schach, only then will it be kosher. So as long as the upper schach is also within 20 amas of the floor of the ground, then you can combine the two layers of schach. But if the upper layer of schach was above 20 amas, then you wouldn't be able to combine it with the lower level schach, because schach that's above 20 amas is not good. Zokt Rashi. I'm sorry?
Isn't that just a refute what we said before, that we can combine the branches?
You could only combine schach if it's kosher schach, unless it's bottle. Okay, so you're asking me here it's not bottle. Okay, so let's see Rashi. You're raising a good point. So let's see what he says. Schach above 20 is possible, so you couldn't combine it. But if it's within chaf, litzdarf, it'll be mitzdarf. Unless the upper schach is a complete schach, then the tifsel tachtonin to sukkah tachasukkah. So Duvi is asking, very simple. If I could be mitzdarf, the puzzle is schach of a tree. In the last case, Why can't I be mitzaref the pasal schach that's above 20? Right. So the answer is, I guess that schach that's above 20 can't be mitzaref. The pasal schach on a tree, we still have it within 20. If the schach is above 20, it cannot be part of it.
I don't understand the difference, because if it's still attached to the tree, you can't use it as schach. Doesn't matter.
The answer is the schach that's connected to the tree is mixed in, and it's batal b'roi. Schach that's 20 amas higher than me, it's not mixed together. It's not chaftan. The only reason why I worked with them at base is because it was chaftan. We mixed it together. Here you can't mix them together. It's way too hard. So let's see the Heilige Gemara Vayt. So the Gemara asks,
Yossi, it's 52.
Oh, we better stop here. It's 60. Okay, strike. So we'll stop here and we'll be mamshech tomorrow. Thank you very much. Everyone should have a wonderful, wonderful day. Our prophecy soar above 20. And it should be Cham to move until the sun should shine on us. We should have a beautiful muscle.
Hey.